The sound of shattering plates cut through the busy chatter of Murphy's diner like a gunshot. Every head turned as Shanice Williams crashed to the floor, her body crumpling in a way that told everyone something was terribly wrong. The tray of food she'd been carrying scattered across the checkered linoleum, coffee splashing across her uniform. "I'm fine! I'm fine!" Shanice gasped, even as her face twisted in agony. Her hands frantically grabbed at her right leg, which bent at an unnatural angle beneath her. Just slipped is all. But she wasn't fine. The leg she'd been hiding for weeks, wrapped tight in bandages beneath her uniform, throbbing with every step she took, had finally given out. The diner fell silent. Customers stared. Nobody moved. Nobody except for the man in the worn leather vest sitting at the corner booth. He moved like water, fluid and fast, crossing the diner floor in 3 long strides. The patches on his back made other customers shrink away. Hell's Angels. The words nobody in this small town said out loud. "Don't touch me," Shanice whispered when he knelt beside her, panic flashing across her eyes. The biker ignored her protest. "That leg's been broken for weeks," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man whose appearance screamed danger. "And you've been walking on it this whole time, haven't you?" Shanice's eyes widened. How could he possibly know? The man they called Razor glanced around the diner, taking in the staring faces, the manager frozen in the doorway, the cook peering through the service window. His jaw tightened as he made a decision that could destroy everything. "I'm helping her," he announced, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Someone call an ambulance." When nobody moved, he fixed his ice-blue eyes on a teenage boy clutching his phone. Now. What happened next would change both their lives forever. What no one knew was that this man wasn't just any biker. He was hiding something that could get him killed. Beneath the tattoos and the leather, behind the carefully constructed identity of Razor, was FBI agent Jack Morrison, 6 months deep into the most dangerous undercover operation of his career. And he had just broken the first rule of undercover work: don't get involved. Have you ever seen someone in trouble and wondered if you should step in? Have you felt that moment of hesitation, knowing that helping might cost you something? That's exactly what Jack faced in that diner. Except for him, the cost could be his life. In a world where people walk past suffering every day, one man's choice to stop and help might seem simple. But when you're living a dangerous lie, when your every move is watched by men who wouldn't hesitate to kill a federal agent, even the smallest act of kindness becomes a life-or-death gamble. As Jack lifted Shanice from the floor, feeling her body tremble with pain she'd been hiding for too long, he knew he was crossing a line. His handlers had been clear: observe, report, but never intervene. Stay invisible. Stay focused on the mission. But sometimes, being human matters more than following orders. "You're going to be okay," Jack told Shanice, the kindness in his eyes contrasting sharply with his rough exterior. What he didn't say was that he might not be okay at all, because helping this woman, this stranger, could blow his cover in an instant. And in the world of the Hells Angels, a blown cover wasn't just the end of a mission. It was a death sentence. If you've ever wondered what happens when 2 completely different worlds collide, hit that like button and keep watching, because what this undercover angel did next will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story about a biker and a waitress. It's about what happens when humanity breaks through the hardest exteriors, when compassion trumps fear, and when a single moment of kindness triggers a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. The alarm clock blared at 4:30 a.m., and Shanice Williams' hand shot out from under the thin blanket to silence it before it woke the whole house. For just a moment, she allowed herself to lie there, eyes closed, gathering strength for the day ahead. Then came the pain, sharp and immediate as she shifted her right leg. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered into the darkness of her small bedroom. At 45, Shanice's face carried the gentle lines of a woman who smiled often, despite having plenty of reasons not to. 5 years a widow after her husband Marcus died of a heart attack at 42. She'd been the sole provider for her 3 children ever since. The framed photo on her nightstand showed a happier time. Marcus, with his arm around her, their children gathered close, all smiling at a family barbecue that felt like a lifetime ago. Shanice swung her legs over the side of the bed, biting her lip to keep from crying out. The broken leg, her secret, her burden, throbbed with a vengeance each morning. 3 weeks had passed since she'd slipped on the freshly mopped kitchen floor at Murphy's Diner, hearing that sickening crack as she went down. The manager had helped her up, concerned but also clearly worried about liability. "You need to see a doctor, Shanice." "I'm fine," she'd insisted, even as waves of nausea rolled through her. "Just twisted it a bit." But she knew. Deep down, she knew it was broken. The way it bent, the immediate swelling, the pain unlike anything she'd felt before. Still, she'd finished her shift that day, and every day since. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness, Shanice's routine began. First, the painkillers. 2 generic ibuprofen tablets washed down with tap water. Not nearly enough, but all she could afford. Then came the wrapping. An elaborate system of ACE bandages, athletic tape, and a knee brace she'd bought at the dollar store, all working together to stabilize the broken bone enough for her to walk. On the dresser sat a stack of unpaid bills illuminated by streetlight filtering through thin curtains. Electric, past due. Rent due next week. Car payment already late. And tucked beneath them all, a college acceptance letter for her oldest, Darius. His ticket out of this neighborhood if she could somehow scrape together the money for what his partial scholarship wouldn't cover. In the bathroom, Shanice gripped the sink with white knuckles as she stood on one leg to brush her teeth. The face in the mirror looked tired, but her eyes still held determination. She applied a touch of mascara and lipstick, small dignities she allowed herself despite everything. "You got this," she told her reflection. "Just like yesterday, just like tomorrow." Moving silently past the bedrooms where her children slept. Darius, 18, dreaming of college. Tiana, 16, smart as a whip but growing too fast. And Jamal, 12, still her baby, though he'd hate to hear it. Shanice made her way to the kitchen. 3 lunch bags waited on the counter. She'd prepared the sandwiches last night after getting home from her double shift, knowing morning pain would slow her down. Into each bag she slipped a small note. For Darius, "Proud of you always." For Tiana, "Beauty starts with kindness." For Jamal, "Be somebody's hero today." Little traditions that cost nothing but meant everything. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. On good days, Shanice could walk it in 5 minutes. Now, it took 15 painful minutes of carefully placed steps, each one sending shockwaves up her damaged leg. The first bus of the day, 5:15 a.m., carried mostly cleaners, cooks, and other service workers, people whose labor began before the rest of the world woke up. Shanice claimed her regular seat by the window, nodding hello to familiar faces. Maria, who cleaned office buildings downtown, old Mr. Washington heading to his security job, young Trey working early shifts to put himself through community college. None of them knew about her leg. She'd gotten good at hiding her limp when others were watching. Murphy's Diner sat just off the highway, catching both local regulars and travelers passing through. The neon open sign flickered to life as Shanice unlocked the front door at 6 a.m. Inside, she moved through her opening routine, starting coffee, wiping down counters, filling salt and pepper shakers. Each task took longer than it should, but she'd started arriving earlier to compensate. "Morning, sunshine," called Cook Pete as he pushed through the swinging kitchen doors. "You're looking mighty fine today." "You need glasses, Pete," Shanice laughed. the sound genuine despite everything. These small interactions kept her going. The banter with Pete, the regulars who asked about her kids, the truckers who tipped well because she remembered how they liked their eggs. What they didn't see were the moments she ducked into the storage room to readjust her bandages, or how she leaned against the counter when no one was looking, taking weight off her broken leg, or the bathroom breaks that were really just chances to swallow more painkillers with shaking hands. A doctor would cost hundreds she didn't have. X-rays, a cast, physical therapy, all impossible luxuries. And time off work? The thought alone made her stomach clench with anxiety. No work meant no pay. No pay meant no rent. No rent meant no home for her children. So Shanice did what mothers have done since the beginning of time. She endured. She carried plates of steaming food with a smile. She refilled coffee cups and remembered who wanted extra cream. She laughed at customers' jokes and listened to their stories. And if her smile sometimes faltered when she turned away, if tears sometimes threatened when the pain spiked suddenly, no one noticed. Or at least, no one had noticed until now. No one except the quiet man in the leather vest who had started coming in 3 weeks ago. The one with hard eyes that somehow softened when they looked at her. The one who watched too carefully, tipped too generously, and seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. The one they called Razor. Shanice had never spoken more than a few words to him. Men like that, with motorcycle club patches and tattoos crawling up their necks, they spelled trouble, and trouble was the last thing she needed. But sometimes, when the pain was worst, and she thought she couldn't take another step, she'd look up to find his eyes on her, not with pity, which would have broken her, but with something else, something like respect. And somehow, that gave her strength to keep going, one painful step at a time. What Shanice Williams didn't know was that her life was about to change forever, that the secret she'd been hiding was about to collide with a much bigger secret, and that the man who seemed to see her pain would soon reveal something no one could have expected. Jack Morrison stared at the stranger in the mirror. 6 months undercover, and sometimes he barely recognized himself anymore. The thick beard, the hardened eyes, the tattoos crawling up his neck, some temporary, some painfully real, permanent reminders of the line he'd crossed. "Razor," he growled, practicing the voice that had become second nature. "Not Jack. Never Jack." In this world, the dangerous, closed society of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club, Jack Morrison didn't exist. There was only Razor Williams, ex-Army, expert mechanic, and a man with a reputation for being useful, but keeping his mouth shut. A man who had earned his way into the club through carefully orchestrated criminal activities, all staged by the FBI to build his credibility. The tiny apartment he called home these days was nothing like his real place in Virginia. One room, sparse furnishings, nothing personal except for the motorcycle parts scattered across the coffee table. Nothing that could give him away. The walls were thin enough that he could hear his neighbor's TV through them. A constant reminder that someone might be listening to him too. Jack checked his burner phone. A text from his cousin, actually his FBI handler, Agent Ramirez. Family BBQ Sunday, their code for the weekly check-in. He typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. Need anything?" Translation: any specific intelligence they needed him to focus on? The reply came quickly. "Just yourself. Mom's asking about you." Meaning, just stay safe. The higher-ups are getting anxious. 6 months into an operation that was supposed to last 3. 6 months of walking a tightrope, gathering evidence about the club's drug trafficking operations, while convincing dangerous men he was one of them. Men who wouldn't hesitate to kill an undercover agent if they discovered his true identity. Jack tucked the phone away and reached for his kuta, the leather vest with the Hells Angels patches that marked him as a member. Not yet a full patch member, but a prospect nearing the end of his probationary period. Each patch had been earned through tests of loyalty, each one bringing him closer to the club's inner circle and the evidence the FBI needed. The weight of the vest felt heavy on his shoulders as he shrugged it on, heavier than just leather and patches. It carried the weight of his deception, of the lives that hung in the balance, of the case that could finally shut down one of the largest drug pipelines on the East Coast. Razor! The pounding on his door was followed by the gruff voice of Diesel, one of the club's full-patch members. "Get your ass out here. We're rolling in 10. "Coming," Jack called back, his voice automatically shifting to the rougher cadence of Razor. Outside, 5 motorcycles rumbled in the morning light, their owners standing beside them. Men with names like Diesel, Hammer, Ghost, and Skull, names that matched their hardened exteriors. Men who had accepted Razor into their ranks, who rode with him, drank with him, and trusted him with club business. Men he was secretly building cases against. "Prospect," barked Tank, the chapter president, a mountain of a man with tattooed knuckles that had broken more than their share of bones. "You're riding sweep today." Riding sweep meant taking the back position, watching for cops or trouble. It was a test, like everything else in the club. Jack nodded, keeping his face neutral even as his mind calculated what this meant. Tank was testing his vigilance, seeing if he could be trusted with the club's safety. As they roared out of town, Jack felt the familiar rush, the powerful Harley beneath him, the wind against his face, the temporary freedom of the open road. These were the moments when the line blurred most dangerously, when Razor threatened to consume Jack entirely. Because the truth was, parts of this life got under your skin. The brotherhood, the loyalty, the simple code. Even knowing what these men did, the violence, the drug dealing, the criminal enterprises. There were moments when Jack could almost forget why he was here, and that terrified him more than any physical danger. Their first stop was a garage owned by the club, a legitimate business on the surface, but Jack knew it laundered money and served as a drop point for drug shipments. He'd documented 3 such shipments already, carefully feeding the information back to Ramirez during their weekly meetings. "Razor, help Skull with that carburetor," Tank ordered, jerking his head toward the back. Jack nodded, following Skull to a partially dismantled motorcycle. As they worked, the conversation flowed naturally to club business. "Big shipment coming Friday," Skull muttered, just loud enough for Jack to hear. "Tank wants you on security. Time to earn your patches, Prospect." Jack's heart rate picked up, but his hands remained steady on the tools. "I'm ready," he said simply. "You better be," Skull replied. "This one's worth 7 figures. Screw up, and it's not just your patches you'll lose." The threat hung in the air between them. Jack had seen what happened to people who disappointed the club. The memory of a man called Twitch, beaten nearly to death for skimming money, flashed through his mind. Hours later, after checks at 2 more club businesses, the group pulled into the parking lot of Murphy's Diner. Jack's stomach tightened, not with fear, but with a complicated emotion he didn't want to name. "Lunch," announced Tank. "Prospects buying." The diner had become their regular spot 3 weeks ago. Jack knew why they'd chosen it. Isolated enough for private conversation, close to their territory, good sight lines to spot any trouble coming. What the others didn't know was that it had become important to Jack for entirely different reasons. She was there, as always, Shanice, moving between tables with a smile that never quite reached her eyes, carrying her pain with a dignity that few would notice. But Jack noticed. His training had taught him to observe, to catch the details others missed. The slight wince when she put weight on her right leg, the way she leaned against the counter when she thought no one was looking, the carefully disguised limp. "Your usual, gentlemen?" she asked, approaching their table with coffee pot in hand, her voice warm despite the wariness in her eyes. The others ordered, crude comments mixed with their food requests. Jack kept his order simple, his eyes meeting hers briefly. He saw the pain there, alongside the determination. He recognized it because he carried his own version of it, the strain of living a lie, of enduring what must be endured. In another life, he might have helped her openly. In this one, all he could do was leave generous tips and watch for the moment when her facade might crack completely. What he couldn't afford was to care too much. Caring was dangerous in his line of work. Caring led to mistakes. Caring could get you killed. Yet, as he watched Shanice move carefully between tables, Jack realized with a sinking feeling that it might already be too late. In a world where he trusted no one and nothing was real, her silent struggle had somehow become the most authentic thing in his life, and that made her dangerous in ways neither of them could imagine. Day after day, Murphy's Diner became the backdrop for a silent conversation. Words rarely passed between them, just coffee, black from him, and coming right up from her. But something deeper was building beneath the surface. Jack noticed everything about Shanice Williams. It was the training, of course, the constant vigilance that kept undercover agents alive. But it was something more, too. A recognition. Both of them were hiding something. Both carrying burdens they couldn't put down. Tuesday morning, week 4 of the Angels making Murphy's their regular spot. Shanice approached their table, coffee pot in hand. Tank and the others were deep in conversation about territory disputes with a rival club. Jack watched as she refilled their cups, her movements practiced and efficient. But when she reached across to fill Diesel's mug, he saw it. The flash of pain, quickly masked, as she put weight on her right leg. "Anything else I can get you, gentlemen?" she asked, her voice steady despite the beads of sweat forming at her temples. The others barely looked up, but Jack found himself speaking. "We're good. Thanks." Their eyes met briefly. He nodded slightly, an acknowledgement of her pain that he hoped only she would notice. Something flickered across her face, surprise perhaps, before she moved to the next table. Later that day, when the others had stepped outside to smoke, Jack left his payment tucked under his coffee cup. The usual, bill plus a $20 tip, but this time he'd written something on the napkin beneath it. Ice. 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. Simple medical advice for her injury. Nothing that would raise eyebrows if found, but clear enough that she'd understand. A risk, but a small one. When he returned with the others, the table had been cleared, the napkin gone. Thursday afternoon brought rain and fewer customers. The Angels claimed their usual corner booth, loud and demanding as always. Jack noticed Shanice moving slower today, the pain more evident in each careful step. "Where's our food, sweetheart?" called Ghost, interrupting her as she served another table. "We've been waiting 15 minutes. "Coming right up," she assured him with a practiced smile, though Jack could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Better be," muttered Skull, "or we might have to find another spot." Jack watched her hurry back to the kitchen, fighting her limp every step of the way. When she returned minutes later, balancing their plates with practiced skill, he saw what the others missed, the slight tremor in her hands, the tightness around her mouth. As she set his burger down, Jack purposely dropped his napkin. "Sorry," he said, bending to retrieve it the same moment she did. In that brief moment, shielded from view by the table, he whispered, "You need a doctor." Her eyes widened, but she straightened professionally, saying only, "Enjoy your meal," before moving away. The Angels ate, argued, and planned as they always did. Jack participated mechanically, his attention divided. When they left, he made sure to be last. As he paid at the register, he placed his credit card on the counter alongside a small tube of professional-grade pain relief cream, the kind athletes use, easily purchased at any drugstore. "Thought you might need this," he said quietly, "for sore muscles." Shanice stared at the tube, then at him, wariness battling with gratitude in her expression. "I don't take gifts from customers," she said finally. Jack shrugged. "It's not a gift. Just something a friend might leave behind by accident." He walked out before she could respond, feeling her eyes on his back. Another risk. A bigger one this time. But the image of her pain-filled eyes haunted him as he rode away. The following Tuesday, Jack arrived at Murphy's alone. It was unusual for him to be without the club, but he'd made an excuse about checking on a parts delivery. In truth, he'd been unable to shake his concern after the weekend, when he'd spotted Shanice through the window, nearly collapsing against a table when she thought no one was looking. The diner was quiet in mid-afternoon. Shanice looked up when the bell over the door jangled, her professional smile faltering slightly when she saw him alone. "Just you today?" she asked as he took a seat at the counter rather than the usual booth. "Just me," he confirmed, keeping his voice casual despite the risk he was taking. Club members were expected to stay together, to represent the Angels as a unit. Being here alone could raise questions he couldn't afford. "Coffee," she offered, already reaching for the pot. "Please." As she poured, he noticed the new brace peeking out from beneath her uniform pants. Better quality than the dollar store version she'd been using before. The pain cream was working then. She'd accepted his help, however small. "How long?" he asked quietly when she set the mug down. Shanice froze, coffee pot still in hand. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Your leg. The broken one you've been walking on for weeks now." She glanced around nervously, but the diner was empty except for an elderly couple by the window, too far away to hear. "Why do you care?" she finally whispered. It was a good question. One Jack had been asking himself too often lately. Why did he care? Why risk his cover, his mission, his life for this woman he barely knew? "Some things you can't ignore," he said simply. Shanice studied him, suspicion and curiosity mingling in her gaze. "You're not like them," she finally said. "The others." A dangerous observation, one that cut too close to his true identity. "You don't know me," he replied, his tone harder than he intended. "I know you noticed when no one else did," she countered, her voice gaining strength. "I know you left medical advice on a napkin and expensive pain cream at my register. I know you're here now without your friends." Jack took a slow sip of his coffee, buying time. The leg, how did it really happen? For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Slipped on a wet floor, back in the kitchen. Heard it snap when I went down." She shuddered at the memory. "Can't afford a doctor. Can't afford time off." End of story. "It's not healing right," Jack said. Not a question. "No." Her admission was barely audible. "It's getting worse." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. In his world, both worlds, FBI and Hell's Angels, showing weakness was dangerous. Yet here was this woman, carrying her pain day after day, never complaining, never stopping, for her kids, for their future. "Let me help," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Shanice shook her head. "Why would someone like you help someone like me?" The question hung between them, a gulf of assumptions, stereotypes, and genuine danger. "I have my reasons," he said finally. Their eyes met across the counter, a moment of connection that transcended the roles they played. Waitress and biker, black woman and white man, single mother and undercover agent. For that brief moment, they were simply two people recognizing something in each other. The bell over the door jangled, breaking the spell. Shanice straightened, coffee pot raised like a shield. Jack turned casually, his heart sinking when he saw Tank and Hammer entering the diner. "Razor!" Tank called, his suspicious gaze moving between Jack and Shanice. "Thought you were checking on parts." "Finished early," Jack replied smoothly, sliding into his Razor persona with practiced ease. Needed coffee before heading back. Tank nodded, but his eyes remained narrowed. Thoughtful of you to save our booth, he said, heading toward their usual spot. Come on. Jack stood, leaving money on the counter. As he turned to join the others, he whispered to Shanice, "This isn't over." The next week brought escalation. Jack watched Shanice's condition deteriorate day by day. The subtle signs he'd noticed before became increasingly obvious, at least to him. The pallor beneath her brown skin, the slight fever flush on her cheeks, the way she leaned more heavily on counters and tables for support. Infection. The broken bone was causing an infection that could become life-threatening if not treated. On Thursday, he managed to arrive early before the others. Shanice was refilling salt shakers, her movements slow and careful. "It's infected, isn't it?" he said without preamble. She didn't look up. "I'm handling it." "No, you're not," Jack countered, keeping his voice low. "You need antibiotics, a proper cast, maybe surgery." "With what money?" she hissed, finally meeting his eyes. The pain and fear there hit him like a physical blow. "With what insurance? Who's gonna feed my kids if I take time off?" "There are ways. Not for people like me," she cut him off. "So, unless you're a doctor under all that leather, there's nothing you can do." Jack stepped closer, lowering his voice further. "What if there was a way? What if—" The rumble of motorcycles outside silenced him. The angels had arrived. Shanice straightened, wincing as she put weight on her bad leg. "We're done here," she said firmly, turning away. But Jack saw it. The slight sway, the moment of dizziness that nearly toppled her. He reached out instinctively, steadying her with a hand on her arm. "You're burning up," he said, feeling the heat of her skin through her uniform. "This is serious." "I know," she whispered, and for the first time he heard genuine fear in her voice. "But there's nothing I can do." As the angels pushed through the door, Jack released her arm and stepped back, but a decision had been made in that moment of contact. He would help her. Mission be damned, cover be damned, consequences be damned. He just had to figure out how to do it without getting them both killed. Have you ever noticed someone hiding their pain? That person smiling through their struggle, carrying burdens no one else can see. Maybe it was a coworker pushing through illness because they couldn't afford a day off, or a friend hiding their depression behind a cheerful facade. Comment below with a time you helped someone in need, or wish you had. Sometimes seeing someone's hidden pain is the first step to changing their life. Saturday mornings at Murphy's Diner were always chaotic. Families stopping for breakfast on their way to weekend activities. Truckers grabbing a hot meal after overnight hauls. Locals coming in for their weekly catch-up over coffee and pancakes. The bell above the door jangled constantly as customers flowed in and out. For Shanice, it was usually the most profitable shift of the week. Today, it felt like a battlefield she wasn't sure she'd survive. The infection in her leg had gotten worse overnight. Her skin burned with fever, and each step sent lightning bolts of pain shooting from ankle to hip. The makeshift brace felt useless now. Twice already, she ducked into the bathroom to swallow more painkillers, but they barely took the edge off. "Order up!" Pete called from the kitchen, sliding 3 plates onto the pass-through window. Shanice took a deep breath, balanced the plates on her arm with practiced skill, and pushed away from the counter. Just 3 more hours, she told herself. Just make it 3 more hours. At their usual corner booth, the angels watched her approach. Over the past weeks, they'd become regular fixtures at Murphy's, intimidating presences that other customers gave wide berth. Today, there were 6 of them, including Jack. They'd been huddled in intense conversation since arriving, something about a shipment coming in that night. "Pancakes and bacon," Shanice announced, setting the first plate in front of Ghost. "Denver omelet for you. This one to Hammer. And steak and eggs rare." The last plate went to Tank. As she turned to get the remaining orders from the kitchen, her vision blurred suddenly. The diner seemed to tilt sideways. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, accidentally knocking over Tank's coffee cup. Hot liquid spilled across the table and onto his lap. "What the hell?" Tank roared, jumping up as coffee soaked his jeans. "I'm so sorry," Shanice gasped, grabbing napkins from the next table. "Let me clean that up." "You stupid," Tank began, but his words cut off as he really looked at her face. "What's wrong with you? You're white as a ghost." Shanice opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. The pain in her leg had turned into a strange numbness, and the edges of her vision were going dark. She felt herself sway. "She's going to," someone started to say. Then the floor rushed up to meet her. Jack saw it happening as if in slow motion. The subtle signs he'd been tracking for weeks. The fever, the increasing weakness, the infection taking hold, culminated in this moment. Shanice's eyes rolled back, her knees buckled, and she began to collapse. He moved without thinking, FBI training overriding everything else. In one fluid motion, he was out of the booth and catching her before she hit the ground, cradling her limp form against his chest. "Call 911, he barked, his voice cutting through the shocked silence of the diner. The commanding tone, more federal agent than biker prospect, caused several heads to turn, including those of his fellow angels. Jack didn't care. He was already lowering Shanice gently to the floor, 2 fingers pressed to her neck to check her pulse. Too fast, too weak. Her skin burned against his hand. "She needs an ambulance now," he said, looking up at the wide-eyed teenage hostess. "Tell them suspected sepsis from an untreated fracture. High fever, rapid pulse, loss of consciousness." The medical terminology flowed automatically, part of his FBI emergency response training. Only after the words left his mouth did he realize his mistake. Bikers didn't talk like that. Prospects definitely didn't take charge like that. Tank was staring at him, suspicion darkening his features. "You a doctor now, Razor?" Jack forced himself to keep his voice steady. "Army medic. 2 tours." The cover story they'd created included military service, a convenient explanation for his medical knowledge, if he needed it. He'd hoped he never would, but right now, Shanice's life mattered more than his cover. "We need to cool her down," Jack continued, shrugging off his leather vest and rolling up his sleeves. "Someone bring ice packs or cold wet towels." The diner manager hurried off to comply, while customers watched the scene unfold with a mixture of concern and curiosity. No one approached the cluster of bikers, even with a woman lying unconscious on the floor. "What's wrong with her?" asked a woman at a nearby table. "Her leg," Jack explained, carefully rolling up Shanice's uniform pant leg to reveal the crude brace and the angry red skin beneath it. The sight made several people gasp. The break was clearly visible, the bones slightly misaligned, the skin around it swollen and discolored with infection. "She's been walking on a broken leg for weeks. Now it's infected, and the infection's in her bloodstream." As Jack checked her vital signs again, he was acutely aware of the 5 angels watching his every move. He'd broken character, shown knowledge he shouldn't have, revealed concern that a prospect shouldn't feel for a random waitress. Diesel leaned toward Tank, whispering something Jack couldn't hear. Tank's eyes narrowed further. The manager returned with ice packs and wet towels. Jack placed them strategically, on her forehead, behind her neck, under her arms, working with practiced efficiency. "You seem pretty concerned about this waitress," Tank said, his voice dangerously quiet. Jack met his gaze steadily. "Someone's got to help her." "Yeah, but why you?" Skull chimed in. "Since when do you care about some random black chick?" The racist comment made Jack's jaw tighten, but he kept his focus on Shanice. "She's a human being in trouble." Tank crossed his tattooed arms. "We need to talk about this later, Prospect." The threat was clear. Jack had raised suspicions. Questions would follow. Hard ones. Shanice moaned softly, her eyelids fluttering. Jack leaned closer. "Shanice? Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened partially, unfocused and glazed with fever. "My kids," she whispered. "Who's going to pick up my kids?" "Don't worry about that now," Jack said gently. "Help is coming." "Can't afford hospital," she mumbled. "The bills. Darius's college." Jack felt something twist in his chest. Even now, barely conscious, her first thoughts were for her children. Distant sirens grew louder. The ambulance was approaching. Time was running out for Jack to make a decision that would change everything. In moments, paramedics would arrive. They would take over Shanice's care. She would go to the hospital, receive treatment that would save her life, but potentially destroy her financially. And he would be left to face the angels and their suspicions. Suspicions that could unravel 6 months of undercover work, destroy a case against a major drug trafficking operation, and quite possibly get him killed. Or he could step back, let the paramedics do their job, maintain his cover, complete his mission. The choice crystallized as Shanice's feverish eyes found his. "Please," she whispered, "my children." Jack looked up, meeting Tank's cold, evaluating stare. Then he looked around the diner, at the customers watching from a distance, at the staff hovering uncertainly, at the complete absence of anyone stepping forward to help this woman beyond this moment of crisis. In the FBI, they'd trained him for moments like this. Moments when maintaining your cover meant letting bad things happen. "The mission comes first," his handler had told him repeatedly. "No matter what you see, what you hear, what happens, the mission comes first." But they'd never trained him for Shanice Williams. As the ambulance pulled up outside, lights flashing through the diner windows, Jack made his decision. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. The direct line to his handler. "I need a favor," he said when Agent Ramirez answered, aware of Tank and the others listening to every word. "And I need it now." The mission wasn't coming first today. Shanice was. "Who the hell are you calling?" Tank demanded, taking a step closer as paramedics pushed through the diner door. Jack held up one finger in a wait gesture that could have gotten a prospect beaten on any other day. But confusion had momentarily replaced anger in Tank's eyes. Confusion Jack needed to exploit. "Ray, it's me," Jack said into the phone, using his handler's undercover name. "Remember that nurse you're dating? The one at County General?" He locked eyes with Tank as he spoke, silently willing the club president to listen, to wait. "I need her help. Got a lady here, single mom, 3 kids, broken leg gone bad, sepsis. She's headed to your girl's hospital now." Agent Ramirez, to his credit, caught on immediately. "What the hell are you doing, Morrison?" he hissed through the phone. "This is way outside protocol." "Yeah, I know it's asking a lot," Jack continued smoothly, watching the paramedics assess Shanice. "But she's good people, works hard, kids depending on her." The paramedics were fitting an oxygen mask over Shanice's face, taking her vitals, preparing to move her to a stretcher. One of them looked up at Jack. "You family?" Before Jack could answer, Tank stepped forward. "He's her friend," he said, surprising everyone. "And he's coming with her." Jack's eyes widened slightly, the only sign of his shock at Tank's unexpected support. "Sir, only family can—" the paramedic began. "He's going," Tank repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. He turned to Jack. "Finish your call, then go. We'll handle things here." In his ear, Ramirez was practically shouting, "Morrison! This could blow everything. 6 months of work." "Thanks, brother," Jack said to Tank, Then into the phone. Look, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Just make sure she gets treatment without the bills crushing her. I'll explain everything Sunday at the family barbecue. You're risking the entire operation for a waitress? Ramirez demanded. Jack lowered his voice. Some things matter more. I'll find a way to make it work. He ended the call before Ramirez could argue further. The paramedics had Shanice on the stretcher now, ready to move. Her eyes fluttered open again, finding Jack's face. My kids, she whispered again through the oxygen mask. Jack knelt beside her. I'll take care of it, he promised. What school? Who picks them up? As Shanice weakly gave him the information, Jack was acutely aware of Tank watching the exchange with calculating eyes. The moment of support didn't mean trust. It meant something else. Something Jack would have to figure out while somehow keeping his cover intact. Go, Tank said when the paramedics began moving the stretcher. Call when you know something. Jack nodded, following the stretcher toward the door. He paused beside Tank, keeping his voice low. Thank you. Tank's expression remained unreadable. We'll talk later. You've got some explaining to do. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and radio chatter. Jack sat in the ambulance holding Shanice's hand as the paramedics worked around him. His mind raced, calculating risks, weighing options, trying to formulate a plan that wouldn't get him killed or blow the case wide open. Helping Shanice meant exposing himself, not just to the angels who were already suspicious, but potentially to Shanice herself. He'd have to use FBI resources to help her, which meant involving others in his deception. Every additional person who knew his true identity increased the risk of exposure, but letting her suffer wasn't an option. Not anymore. At the hospital, they whisked Shanice immediately into treatment. Jack found himself in the waiting room, still wearing his Hell's Angels vest, drawing curious and fearful glances from other patients. He paced restlessly, his thoughts a chaotic jumble of duty and compassion. His burner phone rang. Ramirez. You better have a damn good explanation, his handler said without preamble. She would have died, Jack replied simply. That's not your problem. Your problem is getting evidence on the Angels' drug operation. 6 months, Morrison. 6 months deep cover, and you risk it all for a waitress? Jack closed his eyes, leaning against the wall. She has 3 kids, Ray. No husband. No insurance. Works 60 hours a week serving entitled jerks who don't even see her. And she broke her leg weeks ago, but kept working because she couldn't afford to stop. Silence on the other end. Then, this isn't like you. Maybe it should be, Jack said quietly. Maybe we all get too comfortable letting people suffer while we focus on the bigger picture. More silence. Jack could almost hear Ramirez's mind working, weighing options, just as he had been doing. What do you need? Ramirez finally asked, his tone resigned. Medical care. Good care, no bills, and someone to check on her kids until she's stable. I have the addresses. And how exactly do you plan to explain this to the Angels? Tank already suspects something. Jack stared out the waiting room window, watching ambulances come and go. That's where it gets interesting, he said. I think I can use this. Make it strengthen my cover instead of breaking it. How? The Angels have a thing about being protectors. It's part of their self-image, twisted as it may be. If I frame this right, make it about protecting someone who works hard, who's been serving them loyally, I might be able to turn this into a way to get deeper in. That's a hell of a gamble, Ramirez said. Got a better idea? The silence was answer enough. One more thing, Jack said. I need background on Tank. Deep background. Things that wouldn't be in his official file. Why? Because his reaction today wasn't what I expected. There's something there, something I can use. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. Are you here for Shanice Williams? I have to go, Jack told Ramirez. "Make the arrangements. And Ray, thank you." He hung up and turned to the doctor, his face a mask of concern. "How is she?" As the doctor explained Shanice's condition, the severe infection, the improperly healed fracture that would require surgery, the lengthy recovery ahead, Jack's mind was already piecing together his plan. He would have to be Jack and Razor simultaneously now, FBI agent and outlaw biker, protector and infiltrator. He would have to find a way to use the Angel's own code against them, to make helping Shanice seem like the biker thing to do, and he would have to keep her from learning who he really was, even as he used federal resources to save her life and protect her family. It was impossible, dangerous, likely to fail spectacularly, but as he thought of Shanice fighting through pain day after day for her children, he knew there was no other choice. Sometimes, being human matters more than following orders. Outside County General Hospital, Jack leaned against the wall, phone pressed to his ear. The call with Tank was going exactly as he'd expected. Suspicion, demands for explanation, thinly veiled threats. What he hadn't expected was the opportunity it presented. "I need to understand what I just saw, Prospect," Tank growled through the phone. "Since when do you care about some waitress? And where'd you learn to talk all doctor-like?" Jack took a deep breath. This was the moment. The gamble. "Army medic, like I said. 2 tours in Afghanistan," he replied, sticking to his cover story. "Saw too many civilians caught in crossfire. Good people just trying to work, feed their families." He paused. "Like Shanice." "That doesn't explain why you care about this particular woman." Jack chose his next words carefully. "She reminds me of my mom." The silence on the other end told Jack he'd struck the right chord. His FBI research into Tank had revealed a surprisingly close relationship with his own mother, a hard-working single parent who'd raised him alone after his father went to prison. It was a detail absent from official files, something Agent Ramirez had discovered through deep background checks. "My mom worked 3 jobs after my dad split," Jack continued, building on his fictional backstory. "Served ungrateful customers all day, came home with swollen feet, never complained. One winter she got pneumonia, kept working anyway, nearly died because we couldn't afford a doctor." Another beat of silence. Then, "How's the waitress doing?" "Not good," Jack said, allowing genuine concern into his voice. "Infection spread to her bloodstream. They're pumping her full of antibiotics, but she'll need surgery to fix the leg properly. Weeks of recovery after that." "And she's got kids?" 3. Oldest is about to start college. He got a scholarship, but they still need money for books, housing. That's why she kept working on a broken leg. Couldn't lose the income. Tank was quiet for so long that Jack wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, "Where are the kids now?" "Still at school. Nobody's told them yet." "What hospital expenses look like?" Jack blinked, surprised by the question. "Bad. No insurance. We're talking tens of thousands." Another pause. Then Tank said something that changed everything. "The Angels take care of their own." "Shanice isn't," Jack began. "She serves us every day," Tank cut him off. "Shows respect. Doesn't flinch or judge. Works hard. That counts for something." Jack leaned more heavily against the wall, mind racing to process this unexpected opening. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking you stay there. Keep an eye on her. I'll handle things on this end." Tank's voice had shifted from suspicious to determined. "And Razor? Good call today. Most prospects would have stood back, let someone else handle it." The call ended, leaving Jack staring at his phone in disbelief. The gamble was paying off, but in a way he never could have predicted. Inside the hospital, a nurse approached. Young, blonde, professional. "Agent Morrison?" she whispered. "I'm Nurse Martinez. Agent Ramirez sent me. Jack glanced around to ensure no one was listening. Call me Razor. Even here. She nodded. Miss, Williams is stabilized. We've started aggressive antibiotic treatment. The orthopedic surgeon will see her when the infection is under control. And the bills? Being handled through a special FBI Victim Assistance Fund. Technically not for this type of situation, but Agent Ramirez is calling in favors. Jack nodded, relief washing through him. Her children. Agents are picking them up from school now. They'll be brought here with a cover story about a community support program for medical emergencies. She handed him a small earpiece. Ramirez wants you on comms. He's not happy about this situation. Jack slipped the nearly invisible earpiece in. Immediately, his handler's voice filled his ear. You're playing with fire, Morrison. It's working, Jack murmured, pretending to check his phone. Tank is on board. More than on board. We just intercepted club communications. They're organizing something. What did you say to him? Before Jack could respond, the hospital entrance doors slid open. His heart nearly stopped when Diesel and Ghost walked in, scanning the waiting room until they spotted him. Razor, Diesel called, striding over. Tank sent us. Jack tensed, ready for anything. Had his gamble failed after all? We brought you this, Ghost said, holding out a paper bag. Clean clothes, food, burner charger. Jack accepted the bag, confused. Thanks, brothers. Tanks called an emergency meeting at the clubhouse. Diesel continued. Full members only. That was unusual. Prospects were typically required to be present at club meetings, even if they couldn't vote or fully participate. Being excluded meant something significant was happening. What's going on? Jack asked. Ghost shrugged. You'll find out. How's she doing? The casual question surprised Jack. These were men he'd seen beat a person unconscious for showing disrespect, who trafficked in drugs that destroyed communities, who lived by a violent code of retribution. Yet, here they were, asking about a waitress's health with what seemed like genuine concern. Fighting, Jack said simply. Infection's bad. Long recovery ahead. Diesel nodded. Her kids? On their way here. The two angels exchanged glances. Good, Diesel said. Tank wants updates every hour. We'll be back later. As they left, Ramirez's voice crackled in Jack's ear again. What the hell is happening? I think, Jack said quietly, they're about to help. Throughout the afternoon, Jack witnessed something he never could have imagined. Angels arrived in pairs, bringing coffee, food, even flowers for Shanice. They spoke quietly, respectfully in the hospital corridors. When Shanice's children arrived, Darius, Tiana, and Jamal, wide-eyed and frightened, they found not only Jack waiting, but 4 massive bikers who inexplicably seemed to be there to help. You're the guys from the diner, Darius said warily, positioning himself protectively in front of his younger siblings, the ones Mom serves. That's right, Tank said, having arrived personally an hour earlier. Your mom's a hard worker. Respects us, we respect her. The teenagers exchanged confused glances. Is she going to be okay? Tiana asked, her voice small. Jack stepped forward. The doctors are doing everything they can. The infection is serious, but she's getting the best care. We can't afford, Darius began. It's handled, Tank interrupted. Don't worry about money. Not now. Later, when the children were settled in Shanice's room, she was still unconscious but stable. Jack found himself alone with Tank in the hospital cafeteria. I don't understand, Jack admitted. Why all this for a waitress? Tank studied him over a cup of terrible coffee. My mother was a waitress. Worked at the same diner for 27 years. Came home with swollen ankles, burns on her arms, back aching so bad she could hardly stand. But she never stopped, never complained. He stared into his coffee, dumped hot coffee on her when she told him to back off. I was there, saw the whole thing, did nothing. Jack remained silent, sensing the rare moment of vulnerability from a man who showed none. Next day, 3 angels came into that diner, old school members. They'd heard what happened, made sure that customer understood he'd made a mistake. Tank looked up, his eyes hard with memory. That's when I knew what the patch meant. It's not just about territory or business. It's about protection, standing up when others won't. Jack nodded slowly, seeing Tank, truly seeing him, for perhaps the first time. Not just as a criminal to be brought down, but as a man shaped by his own history, his own code. Flawed, violent, criminal, but human. There's more, Tank said, lowering his voice. Meeting at the clubhouse? We took a vote. The angels are covering all her medical costs and setting up a fund for her kids. Jack stared, genuinely shocked. How? Every member's contributing. Plus, we're throwing a benefit at the clubhouse next weekend. Bike rally, barbecue, band. All proceeds to Shanice and her family. That's not what I expected, Jack admitted. Tank's expression hardened slightly. What, you think we're just thugs? That we don't take care of people? No, I just... Listen, Prospect. The world sees what it wants to see. They see the patches, the tattoos. They think they know us. They don't. Tank leaned forward. Angels take care of their own. And anyone who shows us respect, who works hard, who doesn't judge us, they earn something back. As Tank outlined the angels' plans, not just for hospital bills, but for rent payments while Shanice recovered, for college expenses for Darius, for ensuring the family didn't collapse under the weight of this crisis, Jack felt a growing sense of dissonance. These men he'd been investigating, whose criminal activities he'd documented for months, were now revealing a side he hadn't fully understood. Their capacity for loyalty and protection extended beyond club boundaries in ways his FBI briefings had never covered. It complicated everything. And yet, watching Shanice's children's relief as they learned their mother would receive the care she needed, Jack couldn't bring himself to regret his decision. There's something else, Tank said, studying Jack carefully. The way you handled this today, taking charge, making calls, knowing what to do, it impressed people. The vote wasn't just about Shanice. Jack tensed. What do you mean? Tank's face broke into a rare smile. Your prospect period ends Friday. You're getting your full patch, brother. If this story is surprising you so far, make sure you subscribe because the ending will absolutely blow your mind. The events unfolding between these unlikely allies are about to take a turn that nobody, not the angels, not Shanice's family, and certainly not Jack, could possibly expect. Shanice Williams opened her eyes to a world transformed. The harsh fluorescent hospital lights seemed to pulse in time with the steady beeping of monitors. For a moment, confusion clouded her mind. Where was she? Why wasn't she at the diner? Then the memories rushed back. The pain, the collapse, the darkness, and something else. Someone catching her as she fell. Mom! Tiana's voice broke through her disorientation. Suddenly, her daughter's face appeared above her. Eyes red from crying, but smiling with relief. She's awake! Mom's awake! Darius and Jamal crowded around the bed, their expressions a mixture of worry and joy. Behind them stood a nurse checking IV lines and monitors. My kids, Shanice whispered, her throat dry and scratchy. How did you get here? Who's taking care of you? We're fine, Mom, Darius assured her, taking her hand. Everything's okay. But the hospital bills. Shanice tried to sit up, wincing at the pain in her leg, now properly cast and elevated. We can't afford. It's all taken care of, said a voice from the doorway. Shanice turned her head, disbelieving, as the man they called Razor stepped into the room. Gone was the intimidating biker who frequented the diner. In his place stood someone whose eyes held genuine concern. He still wore the leather vest with its patches, but somehow it looked different on him now. "What do you mean, taken care of?" Shanice asked warily. Jack moved closer to the bed. "The angels are covering everything. Medical bills, rent while you recover, even Darius's college expenses." Shanice stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "That's not possible. Why would they do that?" "Because you earned it," Jack said simply. "By working hard, by treating everyone with respect, even when they didn't deserve it." "I don't understand," Shanice whispered. Jack pulled a chair beside her bed. "You don't need to understand. Just focus on healing." As days passed, Shanice began to grasp the scale of what was happening around her. The infection that had nearly killed her was responding to treatment. Orthopedic specialists, the kind she could never have afforded, had surgically repaired her leg, inserting pins to properly align the broken bone. Physical therapists visited daily, guiding her through exercises that would eventually help her walk normally again. But it was what happened outside the hospital that truly stunned her. "Your landlord came by the diner looking for you," Jack told her one afternoon, a week into her hospital stay. "Apparently your rent was 3 days late." Shanice's heart sank. "I was saving for it. It's in my purse, in an envelope." "Not anymore," Jack said, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Tank and Diesel paid him a visit." "Oh God," Shanice covered her face. "What did they do to him?" "Nothing violent," Jack assured her. "Just had a conversation about patient rights and predatory housing practices. Very educational for him." And not only is your rent paid for the next 3 months, but he's fixing the broken heater in your apartment and repainting the kids' rooms, free of charge." Shanice stared in disbelief. "He's been ignoring my maintenance requests for 2 years. He's feeling more responsive these days." Later that week, Tiana burst into the hospital room, excitement radiating from her face. "Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today." "What, baby?" Shanice asked, setting aside the magazine a nurse had brought her. "Remember Keisha, the girl who's been bullying me about my shoes and clothes?" Tiana's eyes were wide. 3 motorcycles pulled up at dismissal. Everyone was scared at first, but then they just talked to Keisha for like 2 minutes. "She came to me afterward and apologized for everything." Shanice shot Jack a look that was half gratitude, half concern. "Just a friendly conversation," he assured her. "About respect." The pattern continued. Darius's boss at the grocery store, who had been cutting his hours despite promising full-time summer work, suddenly offered him a promotion with better pay and a flexible schedule that would accommodate college classes in the fall. The insurance company that had initially denied coverage for Shanice's pre-existing, undocumented injury reversed their decision after a visit from several leather-clad representatives. Even the diner was transformed. Pete the cook and the manager visited Shanice in the hospital, bringing news that her job would be waiting whenever she was ready to return, with health insurance benefits that the diner had never offered before. "The angels came in and ordered breakfast," Pete explained, looking somewhat shell-shocked. "Tank suggested to the owner that loyal employees deserve health care, very persuasively." The most remarkable transformation, however, was visible in Shanice's children. The weight of worry they'd carried, the same weight Shanice had seen in her own mirror for years, began to lift. Darius stopped talking about deferring college to work full-time. Tiana smiled more, volunteering to read to her mother during hospital visits instead of taking extra shifts at her weekend job. Even Jamal, who had grown quiet and withdrawn as family struggles mounted, began bringing homework to complete in his mother's hospital room, proudly showing her his improving grades. "They're helping with a fundraiser," Darius told Shanice one evening, still sounding bewildered. At their clubhouse. For us. Who's they? Shanice asked, though she already knew. The bikers. The Hells Angels. Darius shook his head. There are posters all over town. Ride for Shanice. They're expecting hundreds of motorcycles from all over the state. Shanice looked toward Jack, who sat quietly in the corner of the room. Why? She asked softly. Why would they do all this? Jack met her gaze steadily. Sometimes people surprise you. The ripple effect spread throughout the community. Neighbors who had previously crossed the street to avoid angels now nodded greetings. Local businesses donated to the fundraiser. The church ladies who had always whispered disapprovingly about those biker hooligans were now organizing a meal train for when Shanice returned home. Most surprising was the change in Shanice herself. For years, she had carried her burdens alone, too proud to ask for help, too determined to show weakness. The forced dependence of recovery had initially felt like another indignity, until she realized it had given her something precious. Time with her children, without the constant pressure of survival. I never thought I'd say this, she told Jack 3 weeks after her collapse, as a physical therapist helped her practice walking with crutches. But that broken leg might be the best thing that ever happened to me. Jack raised an eyebrow. The sepsis that nearly killed you. Shanice laughed, a free, unburdened sound that had been rare before. Not that part, but this. She gestured around at the hospital room decorated with cards from diner regulars, at her children doing homework instead of working extra jobs, at the window where she could see Tank and several other angels parked outside, standing guard, though no threat existed. I've spent my whole life believing I had to carry everything alone. That asking for help meant failure. And now? Jack asked quietly. Now I know there's another way. Shanice's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people help you. Jack nodded, though his expression held a shadow Shanice couldn't quite interpret. The benefit rally is tomorrow, he said, changing the subject. Over 300 bikes registered already. Will you tell them thank you from me? All of them? Shanice asked. I never would have believed. She trailed off, emotion making it difficult to continue. You can tell them yourself soon, Jack said. Doctor says you'll be discharged next week. The angels are arranging transportation. Let me guess, not an ambulance? Jack grinned. Not exactly. More like a motorcycle escort. Apparently, they're calling it Shanice's Ride Home. Half the town's planning to line the route. Shanice shook her head in wonder. I'm just a waitress. No, Jack said firmly. You're the woman who kept going when anyone else would have given up, who put her kids before herself every single day, who treated everyone with dignity, even when they didn't return the favor. He paused. That's someone worth helping. What neither of them said, what hung in the air unspoken, was that something fundamental had shifted, not just in Shanice's circumstances, but in how she saw herself. No longer just surviving, but worthy of thriving. No longer invisible, but seen. And in a world that had often looked right through her, that transformation might have been the most powerful of all. The day of Shanice's homecoming arrived with unexpected fanfare. Just as Jack had promised, hundreds of motorcycles lined the route from hospital to home, leather-clad bikers from chapters across 3 states, creating a thundering escort that turned heads throughout the community. Neighbors stood on porches, shopkeepers stepped outside stores, and children watched wide-eyed as the procession passed. Shanice, seated in a specially modified sidecar attached to Tank's motorcycle, couldn't stop the tears that flowed freely down her face. Her children followed in a truck decorated with streamers, driven by Ghost. The diner had closed for the day, with a simple sign in the window. Celebrating Shanice's recovery. Join us tomorrow. For Jack, riding alongside, the moment was bittersweet. Tomorrow would change everything. After the procession delivered Shanice to her apartment, now sporting fresh paint, new furniture, and a wheelchair ramp installed by angels overnight, Jack slipped away from the celebration. He rode to a quiet spot overlooking the city and pulled out his secure phone. "It's time," he said when Ramirez answered. "You sure about this?" "Never been more sure of anything." "The director's furious," Ramirez warned. "6 months of deep cover work, and you risk it all for a woman who deserved better than what life gave her," Jack interrupted. "No regrets." The following morning, Jack arrived early at the Angels clubhouse for his patch-in ceremony. The building buzzed with activity, members preparing for the formal induction of their newest brother. Jack moved through the rooms mechanically, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, all while knowing what was coming. Tank found him alone in the back room, staring at the framed photos of angels past and present. "Big day, brother," Tank said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You earned this, especially after everything with Shanice. Showed real heart." Jack turned to face him. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." "The waitress?" Tank raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" "Not with her." Jack took a deep breath. "With me." Before Tank could respond, the clubhouse door crashed open. Shouts erupted from the main room, followed by the unmistakable sound of weapons being drawn. Jack closed his eyes briefly. They were early. What the hell? Tank moved toward the door, but Jack put a hand on his arm. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Understanding dawned in Tank's eyes, followed by a rage so pure it seemed to radiate heat. "You're a cop." "FBI," Jack corrected, his voice steady despite the danger of his situation. 6 months undercover, building a case on your drug operation." Tank's hand moved toward the weapon at his waist, but stopped. "You blew your own cover for a waitress." It wasn't a question. "For Shanice," Jack confirmed. "And I'd do it again." The door burst open. FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons raised. "Federal agents!" Everyone on the ground. What happened next would be debated in FBI circles for years to come. Tank, instead of fighting or reaching for his weapon, slowly raised his hands. His eyes never left Jack's face. "The shipment Friday. The big one you were supposed to provide security for. What's happening with that?" Jack hesitated, then decided the truth didn't matter anymore. "Simultaneous raid. Right now. They're hitting the warehouse, the suppliers, everyone." Tank nodded slowly. Then, to the astonishment of the agents and Jack himself, he said, "Good." As handcuffs were placed on Tank and the other angels, Jack stood frozen in confusion. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned, the culmination of 6 months' work, but Tank's reaction made no sense. "Why good?" Jack asked, stepping closer as agents began leading Tank away. Tank gave him a look that contained both anger and something else, something like respect. "Those drugs kill kids, man. My mom died of an overdose when I was 20. Pills prescribed after a work injury at the diner." He shrugged against his restraints. "Club needed money. I made the deals. Doesn't mean I liked it." Jack stared, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the man before him. "The angels looking out for Shanice," Tank continued. "That wasn't for show. That was real. Remember that." As Tank was led away, Ramirez appeared at Jack's side. "You're in a world of trouble, Morrison. The director wants you in Washington. Today." Jack nodded absently, still processing Tank's words. "The raid? Successful. We got everything. The whole network." Ramirez shook his head. "Despite your best efforts to sabotage it." 3 weeks later, Shanice sat in her recliner, leg still elevated but healing well. The community support had continued even after the arrests. Church members bringing meals, neighbors offering rides, former diner customers stopping by with cards and small gifts. The knock at her door was unexpected. Darius answered it, then called out with confusion in his voice, "Mom, there's an FBI agent here to see you." Shanice looked up, bewildered, as Jack stepped into her living room. Gone was the leather vest, the beard, the hard look in his eyes. Instead, he wore a simple suit, clean-shaven, badge clipped to his belt. "You look different without all the—" Shanice gestured vaguely at his appearance. "The razor costume?" Jack smiled slightly. "Yeah, takes some getting used to." "FBI," she said, the word heavy between them. So everything was a lie. Not everything. Jack sat in the chair across from her. Not what matters. Over coffee, Jack explained everything. His undercover assignment, how helping her had compromised his mission, but ultimately led to an even more successful operation than planned. How the angel's genuine help for her family had revealed complexities in men he'd assumed were simply criminals. "I've been suspended," he admitted. "Careers on thin ice. But they can't argue with the results. Largest drug bust in the state's history." "Because of me?" Shanice asked incredulously. "Because you showed me that seeing people's humanity matters more than seeing their labels." Jack leaned forward. "The director offered me a choice, administrative reassignment or a new position heading community outreach in high-risk neighborhoods. And I start the community position next month, here, in this city." Jack's expression was earnest. "Turns out when you see people as people first, you find better solutions than just locking them up." Shanice studied him. Tank and the others? Facing charges, but cooperating, giving information on suppliers, distribution networks. Their lawyers are arguing for reduced sentences based on the community work they've done. Jack shook his head, still amazed. "The benefit they organized for you is being entered as character evidence." Shanice laughed softly. "Life is strange." "The strangest," Jack agreed. "But sometimes the most unlikely connections teach us the most important lessons." As Jack prepared to leave, Shanice caught his hand. "Thank you. Not just for helping me, but for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else." "You were never invisible, Shanice. Just overlooked. There's a difference." Jack squeezed her hand. "And thank you for reminding me why this work matters. Not the arrests or the statistics. The people." 6 months later, Murphy's Diner hosted a special event. Shanice, now back at work with a fully healed leg and a promotion to manager, moved confidently between tables. The diner had become a meeting place for an unusual group. Former angels serving community service hours, local teenagers in a mentorship program, and FBI agent Jack Morrison, heading the new Community Intervention Initiative. They called it Second Chances, a weekly gathering where former rivals worked together on neighborhood improvement projects. It had started small, with Tank's idea from prison to repair Shanice's apartment building. It had grown into something that was slowly healing divisions throughout the community. Jack watched Shanice laugh with a young girl, one of many she now mentored, teaching them the dignity of hard work, alongside the wisdom of accepting help when needed. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, both recognized how far they'd come, how a broken leg and a broken mission had somehow built something stronger than either could have imagined. Sometimes, the most powerful transformations begin with simply seeing someone else's pain. Sometimes, crossing the lines that divide us isn't just an act of kindness. It's an act of courage that can change everything. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories. that will change how you see the world. Because in a time when it's easy to focus on what divides us, these stories remind us of the humanity we all share, and how a single moment of compassion can start a ripple effect that transforms entire communities.